How's it, guys? Today we are going to look at file and directory management from the Linux terminal prompt. Now the first thing we do is we open the terminal prompt. I'm just going to hit Ctrl+ so everyone can see. Now if we take a listing of the home directory we are currently in, we can see all of the default subdirectories in our home directory. If we want to create a file, the command is touch. If the file does not exist, it will create the file for us. If the file already exists, it will just update the last access time. So we give our file a name, let's call it my file, and hit enter. Now if we take a listing again, we can see my file has been created. To remove a file is even simpler. The command is rm for remove, and we specify our file name, my file. When we hit enter and we take a listing again, we can see my file has been removed. Let's clear the screen. We can also create files with a text editor. The one I'm going to show you is called Nano, and I'm also going to give it a file name. Let's call it my file again. If the file already existed, Nano will open the file for you for editing. If the file does not exist, it will create it for you. Now when we hit enter, we can see the blank file opens, and we can now add text to this file. Some random text, and this can also span multiple lines. Now to save this file, I hit Ctrl+X for exit. It will ask save modified buffer. We hit the Y key for yes, and it will ask file name to write. It defaults to my file, so I'm going to hit enter there. And now if we take a listing, we can see my file has been created. If we want to go back and change the file, we can say again nano my file and hit enter, and we can see our file is pulled up for editing. Now when I exit here and clear the screen, let's take a listing for good measure. If I want to copy this file, let's say I want to copy my file to the documents subdirectory, the command would be copy my file to the documents subdirectory. Now when I hit enter, the file copies. Just to make sure, we take a listing of the documents subdirectory, and we can see my file is inside the documents subdirectory. If we say again, let's scroll up, and we say we want to copy this file again to the document subdirectory and hit enter, it gives us no output. We've just overwritten that file, and it also doesn't give us any visual output that the file has been copied. We can add switches to this command. When we add the -v switch, V stands for verbose, so it will give us an output every time a file has been copied. So now when we hit enter, it gives us the output my file has been copied to the documents subdirectory. But now this file is overwritten. It didn't give us any warning, it just overwrites the file. If I scroll up and add the I switch for interactive, it will prompt every time it wants to overwrite a file. Now when I hit enter, it will give us the prompt to either overwrite or not. You can press Y or N for yes or no if you want to overwrite. Now let's clear the screen once more. We remove the file we created. We take a listing. We can also move files. Let's say I want to move my file into the documents subdirectory. The command would be mv for move. Also, like the copy command, first the source, then the destination. My source is my file and the destination would be the documents subdirectory. And now when we hit enter and I take a listing, we can see my file is not here anymore because it has been moved to the documents subdirectory. Let's take a listing of that subdirectory and we can see my file is there now. Let's clear the screen. Let's move that file back into our home directory. Now we say move. Now our source would be the documents directory. And inside the documents directory, my file, and our destination would be our home directory. Now when we hit enter and take a listing, we can see my file has been moved to our home directory. Just like with the copy command, the interactive switch and the verbose switch works exactly the same. Now let's clear the screen and we take a listing. Let's navigate down into the documents subdirectory. Change directory, documents, and we take a listing and we see there's no files inside the documents directory. Now the next thing I would like to explain is using wildcards. Now let's create a whole bunch of files. The command is touch, and you can specify more than one file when you specify the touch command. Let's call it my file 01, my file 01A, my file 02, my file 02A, your file 01A, and your file 02A. So we are going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 files within this documents directory. Now when we take a listing, we can see that the 6 files has been created. To use wildcards, let's say for example, I would like a listing of all the files that ends with an A. That should give us an output of 4 files. The command would be ls asterisk A. Now the asterisk resembles any character as well as any amount of characters. So now the output is all the files that ends with an A. The ones that doesn't end with an A has been omitted. We can also change the command to show all the files that ends with an O1. Here is only one file, so when we say list all the files that ends with O1, we can see the only file that ends with O1 is displayed. We can also say give us a listing all the files that starts with my file and it doesn't matter what it ends with, and we hit enter. We can see all the files that starts with my file is listed. Just for another example, we can take a listing of all the files that starts with your file. It doesn't matter what it ends with, and it will display the 2 files that start with your file. Let's clear the screen and take a full listing. When we specify a question mark, the asterisk resembles any amount of characters and any character. The question mark resembles one single character and any character. For example, if I say, take a listing of my file, but the files I want has 2 characters after that, it should display my file 01 and my file 02 and none of the others. And when we hit enter, we can see that those 2 files have been listed because they start with my files and then they have 2 characters after that. We can also mix it up a little. We can say list all the files that starts with my file has 2 characters but then ends in an A. It should show all the files that ends with an A and has 2 characters before that, as well as starts with my file. And we can see we get those 2 files. You can use these wildcards with your copy and move commands. The wildcard that is most commonly used is the asterisk on its own. When I say remove all files, it doesn't matter what length, what they start or end with, just all files, and hit enter, we will get a prompt. Are we sure that we want to delete all the files in this directory? And I can say yes, and when we take a listing again, we can see all the files have been removed. Let's clear the screen. Let me show you 1 or 2 neat little tricks. Let's go back to the home directory and take a listing. If we want to create a backup of my file, let's say for example you want to change a configuration file, but you want to store a backup just in case your changes doesn't work, so you can restore from backup. We can say copy. Now the syntax of the copy command is source and destination. For the destination, you can specify that I want the present working directory to be the destination as well, but just copy it to a different file name. So when I say copy my file, now this is our source, but I want to copy it to the current working directory, the present working directory. I just want to call it myfile.bck and hit enter. Now when I take a listing, we can see an exact duplicate has been created just with a file name called bck. Now I can go ahead and make changes, and if I cannot undo these changes, I can just restore the original file from myfile.bck. In the same way that we use the copy command to specify a new file name for the file we have copied, we can also use the move command in the same way. Let's say for instance I want to move my file to our present working directory, but I would like to give it a new name. Let's say my file-new and hit enter. Now we can take a listing. Now we can see that my file has effectively been renamed to my file-new. The Linux terminal does not have a rename command because the move command already does its work. If you would like to rename a file on Linux, use the move command. Let's clear the screen once more and we take a listing. Let's remove all of our old files. Remove all files that starts with my. I want to remove those 2 files. It doesn't matter what it ends with. And take a listing and we can see those 2 files have been removed. That is about it for file operations. Let's look at directory operations. If I want to create a directory, the command would be make directory, and then we specify a directory name. Let's call this mydir. And now when we take a listing, we can see mydir has been created. To remove the directory, it is just as simple. The command is rm for remove dir, and we specify our directory name, which in this case is mydir, and when we hit enter and take a listing, we can see mydir has now been removed. Let's clear the screen. Now let's take another directory listing for good measure. Now with the mkdir command, there is an important switch to remember. It is the -p switch. It stands for create parents. For example, if I want to create the directory mydir, but inside I also want to create the directory yourdir, and I hit enter and I take a listing, we can see that mydir has been created. But when I take a listing of this mydir directory, we can see that yourdir has also been created inside that directory. Now let's clear the screen. Now the command to remove mydir, let's take the listing, there is mydir. The command to remove that directory should now be remove directory mydir. And when we hit enter, it will give us an error, failed to remove mydir directory not empty. This is one of the big flaws of the rmdir command. In fact, this rmdir command hardly ever gets used. What we need to do now is either manually go inside this directory and delete everything inside it, or we can use the remove command with the -r switch. The -r switch stands for recursive operation, and we say remove recursively the mydir directory. And when we hit enter now, we can see the command executes successfully, and when we take a listing, we can see that the mydir and the child directories have also been removed. Now let's clear the screen. Let's take a directory listing just for good measure. Now the recursive switch can also be used with the copy command. Let's take a listing of the boot directory, for example. Let's say I want to copy all the files inside the boot directory as well as its subdirectories and all the files within that. The command would be copy -r for recursive operation, and the source would be absolute path boot, and our destination would be our present working directory, which is our home directory. And we hit enter, we can see the command executed successfully. Now if we take a listing, we can see that the boot directory has been created. We can navigate down into this boot directory and take another listing, and we can see all of those files have been copied as well as the subdirectories. We can navigate down into the grub directory and see that those have also been copied. Let's clear the screen again. Let's go back to our home directory. And that was just for an example. I didn't really want to copy all of those files in the boot directory. So I'm going to say remove recursively everything that is inside the boot directory relative to my present working directory. And I hit enter. It will give me a warning. One of the files have been copied with write protection. I'm just going to say yes there, and we can see the directory has successfully been removed. Now let's clear the screen once more. So what is important to remember here? Well, firstly, the touch command will create a file for you. It will create an empty file. If the file is already there, it will update the last access time of the file. We can edit files with the nano text editor. We can copy files. We can copy files recursively. We can copy files with verbose operation that will give us an output every time a file has been copied. We can also copy interactively, and it will prompt us every time it wants to overwrite a file. The same thing with the remove command. We can do so verbosely. It will give us an output every time a file has been removed. We can do so recursively if we want to remove subdirectories and files. We can also do so interactively. With the move command, we can also do so verbosely. The recursive command is already implied with move. Move does not have the -R switch, but it has the recursive functionality already built in without specifying it. And we can also move files interactively. Every time we overwrite, it will prompt us. With the mkdir command, there's one important switch to remember. It's the -P to create the parents. And then remember, the rmdir command only removes empty directories. When you want to remove a directory that has files or folders inside, the correct command to use would be remove recursively. And that is it for this lesson. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and a subscribe. Thank you.